Hello everyone and welcome back to another edition here of the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast, brought to you as always by the GSMC Sports Network. My name is Christopher Shepard. Thank you all for tuning in. Happy Thursday to you all. We have another great show for you ahead, starting off actually in the world of college football. Got to preview some big games in Week 12 of the college football season. A lot of CFP hopes could be dashed or uplifted in many games across college football, so we got to preview that. We'll be looking at some more general Week 11 prop bets. Yesterday we looked at some Thursday Night Football prop bets. Should be a good one tonight in the NFC East. And now we're looking ahead to Sunday slate. I'm going to update you on some injuries. A little bit more of a positive bent in this segment today rather than the past couple of weeks. More about some players' potential returns for the season. Then I'm making my picks, my all-important picks for some of the biggest games of the weekend in the NFL. And last but not least, going to do a little bit of an early Sunday Night Football betting preview. A very weird game in the AFC between the Bengals and Chargers. But before we get into any of that fun stuff, I do want to remind you that if you want more content such as this or want to look at more exclusive short content, please make yourselves available to the ways to like, follow, and subscribe to the show, not just on YouTube, but around all our social media platforms, TikTok, things of that nature, our website especially. But if you do want to interact with the show more directly, then the best ways to do so will be through the Super Chat, Super Thanks, and Super Stickers features here on YouTube. Great way, like I said, to contribute and interact. You can do three things. You can either click that $ in your chat box in the comment section, leave a tip or donation, go to gsmcpodcast.net as well for any tips or donations if you feel like doing that, or you can just leave any questions, comments, or concerns you have throughout the show, and I will be able to read them out loud on air. I love getting your opinions out there. Just makes the show that much better. But without further ado, let us jump into the first segment of today's show. Actually stick here with our graphics, and let's talk about the week in college football. Week 12. A lot of pivotal games. Not necessarily big CFP elimination games this week, but there is one in particular that we absolutely have to touch upon. And then some minor games. Maybe just for pride for certain teams in terms of the importance of these games, but there's still fun matchups to analyze and diagnose from a betting perspective. So without further ado, let's jump right into the first game, the most important game of the ones I'm going to be talking about. Tennessee going into Athens, Sanford Stadium to take on Georgia. I should have checked that graphic here because we do have some line movement. UJ is not 8.5-point favorites anymore. They are in fact 10-point favorites. And that's perhaps due to the status of Tennessee QB Nico Iamaleava. And I feel that if he does play in this game, I certainly feel like Tennessee's going to stick to the identity they've assumed with him. That he just needs to be efficient enough so that this all-world defense can go to town on Carson Beck and that Georgia offensive line, which looks like it might just be the worst unit in this game. Out of all the units on the field, I'm most concerned, funnily enough, about that Georgia offense. The Tennessee offense, I kind of know what it is. It is very limited in nature, but they don't necessarily have to overcompensate for the lack of defensive prowess because their defense might just be the best in the SEC and in the country. So I'm not necessarily worried if Tennessee doesn't put up enough points. What I'm worried about is Carson Beck continuing this terrible form. 11 interceptions in 12 games, not where he wants to be. And even though this game is at home, this is perhaps the best defense he's faced, and he's going to be harassed all night if that O-line continues to underperform. So I don't necessarily see Georgia winning with this spread this high, but I do see them potentially winning a close one. That being said, I'm not underestimating Tennessee in this one because as much as I want to think Georgia is going to come into this game prepared, much like they were coming off that bye against Texas on the road, I just don't see a path where this offense looks like an offense that can compete against the SEC's best. And Tennessee might just be the best team in the SEC, and they have a chance to go in and prove it in Athens. But that being said, I can't ignore the fact that Georgia has in the past been ready for games of this magnitude, so I do expect them to win this one, but I think that Tennessee will cover the spread. In fact, the over-under actually lowered a little bit to 47.5, so I think that spread is manageable. If Tennessee can generate enough drives where Nico is staying ahead of the sticks and moving the football efficiently without turning the ball over, then I think that there are points to be scored. Georgia's defense is a tough defense, but they have had their weaknesses, and I think you can attack that secondary a little bit. So look for opportunities to avail themselves to Tennessee in this game. And the second game I want to talk about, a little bit on the minor side of things when it comes to CFP stakes, but it could be a determining factor still in this weird ACC race. Clemson taking on Pitt in Pittsburgh. Not necessarily a must-win for Pitt because they are all but eliminated, both from the ACC and CFP picture, but this feels like a must-win for Clemson. Going into Pittsburgh now as 12.5-point favorites, not 10.5-point favorites anymore. I'm sorry, the lines have kind of fluctuated as the week has gone along, and I did make this graphic many days ago. The over-under, though, still at 55.5. And I think that this game will come down to the play and efficiency of Pitt's offense, because this offensive line has not necessarily looked like it did at the start of the season, protecting Eli Holstein, who, while has certainly been a revelation for the Panthers, isn't necessarily someone who plays well under pressure, I believe. They kind of got battered by SMU. Their offensive line struggles were revealed last week against Virginia, and now they're facing a Clemson defense that is highly opportunistic and can tear you down if you don't bring your A game. And so I feel like this is more of a trap game for Clemson should both units for Pittsburgh get on track. That's why I'm looking at a key player like Desmond Reed for Pittsburgh to kind of set the tempo in the run game for them, whereas Clemson, I kind of feel like, can expect more efficiency from both Cade Klubnik and Phil Maffa in their offense, and on the defensive side of the football, just play a Clemson brand of football in that regard. And so that's why I feel like, in terms of my prediction for this game, I'm comfortable with taking the points on Clemson here, even though it's a lot of points in a road game after, a tough stretch for Clemson, kind of getting exposed by Louisville and wondering if winning out will be enough to make the ACC championship, but you got to take care of what's in front of you right now. And maybe along the way, dominoes will fall. Maybe SMU somehow loses a game. Maybe Miami loses another. And you find yourselves with an opportunity in the ACC championship game. But just take care of business in Pittsburgh. And from here on out, it's just win and hope. And that's all that Clemson can do right now. So that's what I'm going to take right here. Clemson on the road against Pittsburgh. The third game I want to talk about, kind of more of a fun one with a little bit of low stakes. Mainly a point of pride for both teams here. Playing for pride, rather. South Carolina going to Missouri. Actually staying at home against Missouri. This one is one of those games where it's not going to have any importance to the playoff picture, but it's certainly a point of importance for these kind of middle-tier SEC teams. And Mizzou, not for nothing, still only has 2 losses, but they are very detrimental in terms of trying to climb back into the rankings and the reckoning for the playoff picture, because they've got blown out by Alabama. And I forget who their initial loss was to, but I do believe it might have been an unranked team at the time. And now they're going into South Carolina to face a team that really could have been in the playoff picture themselves. Close loss to Alabama, close loss in week 1, mind you, against LSU. An upset victory over Texas A&M on the road, and I believe that's at home too. I'm getting a little mixed up talking about these underrated SEC teams here. But what I mean in terms of point of pride game, it's also going to, I believe, open up the betting market a little bit more, because both of these teams are going to bring their A game in this one, not just because, they're fighting for a playoff spot, but because, they felt hard done by the progressions of the season. And so that's why this game is so important to them. Mizzou, 14-point favorites, a little bit of an iffy quarterback situation there. Potentially Drew Pine will have to start this game. Whereas South Carolina, Lenore Sellers has been one of the most enigmatic SEC quarterbacks in the country. And Raheem Sanders is just a monster, one of the most underrated players in the country as well. So I'm actually going to take South Carolina against the spread at home here. I think that Mizzou is a little bit banged up, and South Carolina is just riding a wave of momentum, coming off another great road win against Vandy. And so they'll be looking fresh for this one at home against Mizzou. Then the last game I want to talk about a little bit briefly, not the most exciting game of the bunch I picked, but LSU Florida could be intriguing for LSU's bounce back performance. I feel like against Alabama, they got caught off guard at home, and it wasn't necessarily the best game for them. Nussmeier looked mortal. The receiving core couldn't get going, and Alabama just dominated through the play of Jalen Milroe. With this game, they're going to have a lot more discrepancy between both of them and Florida in terms of talent. While I do like Florida's defense a lot, it's not that potent. It just got absolutely battered by Texas. And this offense being led by Aiden Warner now does not necessarily appeal to me. So look for LSU to bounce back. I don't necessarily like that this spread lowered a little bit to -4 for LSU on the road. I think that, there may be rumors that DJ Lagway will come back and play in this one. But even if he does, I think he'll be a little bit too limited to go up against a team like LSU coming off that painful loss. So look for LSU to go into Gainesville and perform well in a get-right game, kind of much like what Texas did a little bit when they got shell-shocked by Georgia. They played a little bit sluggishly against Vandy and then had the bye, and then at home against Florida had their best performance of the season. So look for that to be similar to LSU. So I'm taking them. So to summate my picks, I'm taking Tennessee to cover the spread, Clemson to win outright on the road, South Carolina to cover the spread at home, and LSU on the road to win outright. Let me know what you think in the comments, because coming up next we transition to the NFL, looking at some more general prop bets for the week. Sunday's slate is looking very interesting, so you definitely don't want to miss this segment right after this short break.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?